Hello.
Good evening.
Good evening. You haven't got your little run sheet app in front of you?
Yeah, I do. One moment, please.
Oh, she's getting it out.
Welcome. I know it by heart now. Welcome back to the Doc Day Drinking Podcast from Nighttime Tasmania. I am drinking red wine, and so are you.
And so am I. Today's my cheat day. Where I had shepherd's pie for lunch. That's the kind of life I'm living. Just
who knew it took so fucking long?
Fine wine and...
My phone's going to die anyway. I'm at 2%.
Trips on the Côte d'Azur, Jensen Healy's, models,
Shepherd's
yachts, and shepherd's pie. That's being said as I tell you. Britain's favourite airport novelist, Beatles, Lord Archer, excuse me. I was going to say Beatles Booker and jailed
Booker?
perjurer.
What's a Beatles? What do you mean, Beatles Booker?
He won really early in the day with the Beatles. He had a
a private party.
No, he had them for. I believe you can check me on this. I believe he had them working with a charity, like got them to come in and support a charity. I'm thinking maybe Oxfam or something like that. Right. But he certainly had some sort of charitable thing that he managed to rope the Beatles in with.
Right.
But yes, and convicted perjurer.
Yeah, well.
So anyway,
didn't hurt him.
He's doing all right.
Yeah.
Allegedly.
He was convicted.
There's going to be a... Oh, yeah. Well, I was going to say...
He went to jail.
What was alleged is that his wife at the time, for most of his books, was a chemistry PhD. And a lot of people alleged that he was so fucking dumb that she wrote them, not him.
Okay.
Or certainly had a bit to do with it. Allegedly, others had alleged, it is said.
Cool.
Anyway... So, welcome back to, I think, which is our 25th podcast.
Yeah.
So we're quarter of a century in. I wanted a century. And following on from our last...
more of a deeper dive.
Podcast, I said I would do some homework. So we ended up talking about...
And you've done it and I have done shit.
That's all right. So we were talking about the artist that wanted a Australian... Of British descent. Wanted their body... to defile it in the name of art, but also respectfully. I'm not sure how that all works. Well, he didn't say he was going to defile it, but still it's...
Use it somehow on public display or something, not sure.
Which there's very little you're allowed to do. I actually looked up the laws on that too, for shits and giggles.
And?
Corpses, big no-no. Ashes are fine.
Right.
So if you want to do, is it to support those loony companies that you go... If you want to have your dear departed turned into a diamond or something, you're allowed to do that. And certainly people do, because, it's if you joint and quarter your old uncle and sort of throw his body parts over over a cliff somewhere and into the sea, that might be in poor taste and illegal, but you can do it with ashes. So I think that's the spirit of the law, that you can do. See, there was a reason.
What if he asked for that?
Like a vulture Indian-style burial.
But there's people who like cannibalism too, want to be eaten.
I think that's more your lunatic hippies with the... and I'm not alleging this, I'm saying this is definitely...
Hippies.
I will fight on this hill. The lunatic hippies that have a pregnancy and want to eat the placenta.
Oh, fuck, no. No, thank you. Anyway, let's move on, because Jesus Christ.
I don't know what you're the one that mentioned cannibalism. Anyway, this isn't setting the scene for what I hope will remain a serious
because you have done proper homework.
Because I've actually done some proper homework. So yes, getting back to the point, yes, the last podcast was heavily around that Tasmanian artist that wanted to do an installation or exhibition of some description, and which brought up a whole bunch of questions around Tasmanian Aboriginals, which is reasonably controversial here, and not. Like, it doesn't come up that often, but when it does come up, people certainly do. It's remarkable. People remark upon it. Like, I wouldn't go so far as to say it's controversial these days, but
no. It comes up
I haven't done that homework.
It comes up as hot topics at various points during the year.
All right, that's fair to say.
Australia Day.
Oh, yeah.
in like if something big's going on.
Or if some artist decides.
That's what I mean, like an artist, something, yeah. but generally, no. There's other bigger, broader topics that are more controversial
and at the moment it is
more
quite
relevant.
And it is quite taboo. Well, it's certainly got the potential to be taboo. So anyway, so I would start by saying the following. Our bona fides when it comes to looking at demographic data. My background, I have 3 degrees in computer science, including a PhD. I have a strong background in mathematics and statistics. I can, even though my my basic arithmetic sucks these days, I have some reasonable authority when it comes to knocking around a few numbers. Similarly, you have a background in business and commerce. You've did accounting at university. You too can add.
Financial services for 20 years, blah, blah, blah.
Right. That being said, this is not scientific, and this is no more bit of homework than an afternoon with a glass of wine, and it wasn't even an afternoon, half of while watching John Wick. As I sat there and did the numbers. So take them all from a grain of salt. I'll put it in the show notes, there are 3 sources for all of them, for every single one of the numbers that we'll discuss, comes from 3 separate documents, all from the Australian Bureau of Statistics.
Cool.
So
reputable source.
Rolled gold, reputable sources. Any errors or omissions are likely mine, and they are intentional. I have no
intentional.
Let's say I have no barrel to push. The other thing is I've had a couple of wines. Any errors or omission are my fault and are unintentional. There is no narrative here, and whilst we may have a little bit, I think if there's a few comments here, I'll go, comment, let's comment.
Please comment.
But no, I mean, I'll describe anything we say as comment. Right. But mostly I want to talk about numbers.
Gotcha.
Because getting to the point was, at the end of our last podcast, we kind of discussed 4 questions we wanted to ask. What kind of culture is there in Tasmania for Aboriginals? Or for Tasmanian Aboriginals? Do they have an actual culture? We're not going to answer that today. We don't know. We're not going to be able to find
TBA.
out. How are they doing compared to the rest of Tasmania? I can't answer those questions.
Cool.
I have those data. We were talking about also what kind of generational disadvantage is there. I don't have those data, but it would be something I think someone, as an exercise for someone, could probably go and tease a lot of them out. Just like, I still think not to jump ahead of our conclusions, but trust me, every scientific paper mentions the conclusions in the introduction, is that I'd still like to drill down by suburb, get a bit more, because the way the sniff I get from most of this is that everyone's in the same boat here. Right, okay. So we'll see how that's my contention. We'll see how that plans out. You're the one, so you haven't looked at any of these numbers, and we'll talk about them together. So we can't find out that number, and then what health issues there are. I can answer those.
I also wanted to know, which you may have in front of you, the actual raw numbers. Like, how many are there?
Can answer that.
Yep.
I can answer that back to 1966.
Yep. Because again...
And we'll do that at the end.
And
we'll try very hard not to have any commentary about it.
If I had to guess, I'd say that the population is increasing.
Well, dear listener, we will get to that at the end, and so will you. So, by means of summary, and I quote the ABS, this is 2021. So most of the statistics we're all going to be talking about is about 2021, and it's going to be, unless I say otherwise, it's 2021 Tasmanian Aboriginals and 2021 Tasmania.
Cool.
Now, I haven't normalised the figures, so, and I'm only going to mention this once. So the grain of salt to have here, and if anyone wants this spreadsheet, you can have it, is that all of the Tasmanian stats will include the Aboriginal stats.
Right.
Okay, so there's going to be a little bit of a margin of error there, and the margin of error, I will say, is going to be 5.4%. Because
that's the population number.
In Tasmania, 30,000 people identified as Tasmania and or Torres Strait Islander in the 2021 census.
Okay.
Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people represented 5.4% of Tasmania's population.
Cool.
Okay. So I'm not going through and normalising them all.
Yeah.
Yep. So just take it with a grain of salt. So where it's close, where the numbers are close, there's going to be a margin. There's going to be 2.5% either way, thereabouts, right? So if anything within 2.5%, it's probably the same, thereabouts. Okay. So the demographics I have that we can discuss today are age, housing, income, health, and education. Pretty standard sort of stuff, right? And we're talking basics. And so we'll start with age. So fairly interesting. So the ABS breaks age up into basically 0 to 4 years, 5 to 14, 15 to 24. So breaking up into about 10-year decade sort of bands. So 2021, 0 to 4 years Aboriginal, 9.5%. 0 to 4 years
of the 5.4% population.
Yes. Yeah. So this is going to be how many people. So the first number that I'm going to give you. So 0 to 4 years, 9.5% of Tasmanian Aboriginals are 0 to 4 years old.
Right.
Okay. And 0 to 4 years in Tasmania overall represents 5.1% of the population. Okay. So what they would say is if you're Tasmanian Aboriginal, there's likely to be more of you that are 0 to 4 years old than in general 0 to 4 years old. Make sense? So like 10% of Tasmanian Aboriginals are 0 to 4 years old, where 5% of Tasmanians are 0 to 4 years old.
Right.
Okay, we'll see how we go as we do this, whether or not this
makes sense
and whether or not we do it a different way. The thing that's annoying is that a lot of the numbers don't match up. That one does, and I haven't done them. So the ABS should get a little bit of a kick up the bum for this. So then they talk about 5 to 14 years for Aboriginals, but then they talk about 5 to 9 years for Tasmanians, and then 10 to 14 years. So we've got to add those numbers together.
Right, yep.
Right, so
different bands.
So let's just do that quickly now. So Tasmanian Aboriginals that are 5 to 14 years old, 22%. Okay, so 1 in 5 Tasmanian Aboriginals are between 5 and 14 years old. So there's lots of kids. In Tasmania, in those two bands, is 5.6 and 6.0. So then you'd say from 5 to 14 years in Tasmanians, that would be 11.6%.
And what was the original one?
22%.
Wow.
So there's twice as many young kids identifying or being identified as Tasmanian Aboriginals, which is also interesting too, because that's how they word it in there. People identifying as Tasmanian Aboriginals.
Which is not scientific.
That's how it is. I am just correlating those data which I possess. So the other one that's interesting. So if you're saying that, well, Tassies, there's they're a younger population. That's good. So let's talk about the not good then. 75 years and over, and I've had to squish the same thing. I had to squish these. So Tasmanian Aboriginals, they just say 75 years and over, and in Tasmanians in general, they've got 75 to 79, 80 to 84, 85 years and over. Right. But I've added these numbers up for us. So 75 years and over in Tasmania, this is a synthetic number, I've added these together, is 8.9%. So lots of coffin dodgers over 75 in Tasmania. Tasmania has an older population. That's perfectly reasonable. This is where our Tasmanian Aboriginal friends aren't doing as well. 2.3%.
Wow.
So the life expectancy,
mortality is higher.
Is they're not living as long. So there's a very coarse health thing. So 65. So
what's the biggest band in Tasmanian Aboriginals? What's the biggest group?
5 to 14 years.
It is that one, right?
So let's just discuss that. So they're doing. There's more young'uns, less oldies. We can draw that conclusion. So 0 to 4 years, 9.5%. I'm just talking about Tasmanian Aboriginals. 5 to 14, there's that 22%. 15 to 24, 17%. 25 to 35, 13%. 35 to 44, 10%. 45 to 54, 10%. Roughly. I'm cutting off the fraction. 55 to 64, 8%. 65 to 74, 5%. So the majority, our young Tasmanian Aboriginal friends are embracing their Tasmanian Aboriginality. So really, if you added up 22, 17, and 9.5, it's actually 17.6. So nearly half are from 0 to 24 years. So the demographics do seem to be skewed towards younger.
I do not like the fact that the word identify is in that question. I don't know if those statistics are capturing...
This is when we get to the bottom, we talk about how those numbers have changed over the years. That's where I'd say...
That's my biggest problem with that so far.
Put a pin in that.
But yeah, it's interesting. So when does the percentage start going down? 55, did you say? It was 8% and then 65 was 5%?
We get into single digits. So that's a good question. So we get into single digits, 55 years and older. That's when we're at 8.8%. So let's have a look at just Tasmanians, where the band's smaller, remember? So 55 to 59 years is 6.6, and then 60 to 64 is 6.9. So let's add those two numbers together. 12 plus, what's that, 13.6, thereabouts. So the number of Tasmanians for that 55 thing, it'd actually be like more than 13%.
You're going to have to change the way you're speaking, because even I'm glazing over.
You're getting bored, or you're losing what I'm saying?
I'm losing what you're saying.
Okay.
So you're going to have to say mainstream population and Aboriginals or something, but Tasmanians and Tasmanian Aboriginals isn't working.
Well, okay, that's fine. So let's just say Aboriginals and Tasmanians, and I mean Tasmania, and that means Tasmanian Aboriginals.
Wholly talking about the state of Tasmania, nowhere else.
So let's. I'm just going to say Aboriginals, and that means Tasmanian Aboriginals, and I'm going to say Tasmania as a whole or anything like that.
Cool.
Just Tasmania means that. So what I'm saying there is right. So the question you asked is when does it start to drop off for Aboriginals? And that's at 55 and over, and at 55 to 64, that band is 8.8%. And 55, and where I started to do maths there, because the bands are smaller for Tasmania, we're talking like 13%.
Wow. Yeah.
Okay. So once you get past 50s,
they have health problems obviously from that point onwards.
We will discuss health in a moment. Maybe you think they do. Maybe they don't. So, dum. Right. So anyway, there's less.
So overall,
but that's where it comes back to your identifiers. Are younger people identifying more as Aboriginals and older people aren't? So I mean, it all comes down to you've got to check that box, and I don't mean no pejoratives today. I don't mean it as a pejorative, but you've still got to check that box, and a lot of people might not want to check that box. A lot of younger people might want to check that box. We don't know. That would be a separate study. Because at the moment, with these census data, you get in the census form and you're just ticking boxes.
That's what I mean. There's no... The ABS is good. Obviously, they've got the forms and everything. Yes, someone's checked the box, but are they legitimately that?
So this is which is funny. I think the only thing that really came down about that, where they got upset about the quality of those data, was when people were putting religion down as Jedi and things like that.
But that got through, remember, didn't it? And it had to come on through that because so many... Didn't it? There was a percentage that... Okay.
No. Even though they were arguing... So I remember they were arguing, how it's made up, so is Christianity... there's a trinity. There's the Emperor Palpatine and the thing. I'm not that fucking into it, really not. I saw the first 3 movies.
All right. So what else?
That's from age. So anyway, so all I get from that, which we can get, is that there's definitely a skew towards younger Aboriginals. Okay, and there's definitely. Just based on the age demographics, it's not looking good over 75. So there seems to be a big difference there. So I'll say that again. Tasmanians, 8.9% over 75. Aboriginals, 2.3%.
Yeah.
But what we'll say, these are people in Tasmania too. And
oh God, don't get us started on the healthcare system here as well.
There's that's an issue. But also, what I was going to get to is more people moving here to retire. We moved here to retire. We just happen to be in our 40s. But classically, people moving here to retire.
So the older population, as we said, is going to be
broader. It might be skewed.
Yeah.
And people that move here, are they more wealthy? Do they have better access to healthcare? There's all those kind of questions, right?
Yeah.
So, again, with all of this, we're just looking at the numbers as it is. So, yeah, they have a few interesting things on age. Staring at the computer and making sure it's still recording. Moving right along. Housing. Housing I found very interesting.
Okay.
So, the housing, there's not a lot of... I haven't dug too deep into it, and I think there's more that you can get into. But so what we can look at housing is comparing, again, Tasmanian Aboriginals and Tasmania everybody, which also includes the Aboriginals, in housing. Now, the housing we've got is owned with what percentage are owned with a mortgage, which
is normals.
Buying a house, normal people. Owned outright.
Us.
Rented through a real estate agent.
What difference does it make? But anyway.
Or housing commission, or from.
Right.
So they don't call it. I've put my note in here. Just says houso, but. For our Aboriginal friends, they've been much more clever and respectful, and said through a housing cooperative, you're renting, but not through a real estate agent.
Right. Okay.
So here we go. Owned with a mortgage. So how do you want to do it? Do you want to do Tasmania first or Aboriginals, or do you want Aboriginals then Tasmania?
Tasmania first.
Tasmania first. So owned with a mortgage, 33% of Tasmanians are buying their house with a mortgage, which is bang on the national average.
Is it?
And the traditional... Well, be careful because I'm talking about numbers. I shall make no claims that are untrue. The general traditional view of housing, a third rent, a third own, a third have a mortgage and are buying.
A third rent, a third own outright, and a third are still mortgage bound.
Buying a house. So that's when I get so shitty. People, 2/3 of Australia think it's perfectly reasonable to be either buying or owning a house.
I like a roof.
Yeah.
Anyway, keep going.
And it's actually higher than that. I think it's like 70% at the last time by those things.
Right.
So
bang
owned with a mortgage, Tasmania, 33%. Owned with a mortgage.
This is going to be low. This is going to be low, isn't it?
35.2. More Aboriginals in Tasmania are buying a house with a mortgage than Tasmanians.
Wow. I am very surprised at that.
And this is the whole point of more surprises are coming. This is why this is interesting and worth your time on a Sunday. Yep. There you go. More of our Aboriginal friends in Tasmania are buying a house than the overall Tasmanian average. Well done them. Congratulations, ladies and gentlemen. Well done you.
Yes.
Owned outright.
Yep.
Oh, did you have any other comments on that before?
You're
going, it's going to be so low.
Yeah, I was thinking it was going to be low.
You racist bitch.
Oh, apparently. Only because the traditional person in my mind who is Aboriginal is the Northern Territorian, not a Tasmanian Aboriginal. So, all right, cool.
This is the old. Did you remember the Did you remember the old fax circulars that used to go around?
Fax.
They were like joke
paper
sheets.
Rolls?
Yeah, no, they were like jokes that used to go around on fax machines.
No, my darling husband, I'm not that
very
fucking old.
Well, there used to be a thing, and there used to be like lots of funny things that people would share with each other. So memes have been around
on a fax machine.
On fax machines, and I remember seeing one when I was a kid that my father brought home, which was something like, this is terrible, but it was like an Aboriginal application form, and it had like, where do you live, and like one of the things was like under a gum tree. Like they checked the box and then piece of tin against a wall,
that could be anyone these days.
And then it had Alan Bond's house that you've declared a sacred site, like...
Did he do that?
No, but it was like those kind of jokes. Yeah. And then it had like, what kind of car do you drive? HK Holden, HT Holden, HG Holden, like every FB Holden, like every old shit box at the time. So anyway, so there you go. So
okay. Well done them.
Well done our Tasmanian Aboriginal friends. They're buying. They're smarter
when it comes to housing.
And well done them.
Yeah.
Owned outright.
Oh, yeah. Tasmanians?
37.1% of Tasmanians own their house outright. You know why? Because traditionally Tassie houses were $7.
$3, yeah.
And that's why I get so shitty with all these people going, I can't afford a house, I can't do it. Well, 37.1% of you own theirs outright.
And what's the national Australian?
I have not got those statistics.
Because that might be a bit higher than that, I'd say.
That is beyond the scope. So I'll pretend I'm at a viva voce. That may well be true, Doctor. However, that is not the point, and I have shown that owned outright for Tasmanians, which is bearing on the premises, is 37%.
All right, and Aboriginals owned outright?
20.2%.
That's a bit of a drop.
That's a bit of a difference. But 1 in 5, so that's what. So here we have. So
they're just not paying their mortgages off as quickly.
Are they? There seems to be a younger skew. Are they?
Yeah,
they're
true.
Younger?
They're not there yet.
Yeah. So there's some interesting reasons. But that being said, which I think is a very positive thing. Right, then I'll make it negative. 1 in 5 Tasmanian Aboriginals own their house outright. Good on them. Nearly, but 2 in 5 Tasmanians own their house outright. So it's a bit of difference there. Rented through a real estate agent.
Right.
Tasmanians, 26.4% of Tasmanians rent through a real estate agent.
Mm-hmm.
Aboriginals, 15.1%.
Right.
Less renters.
But the next category, I'm assuming, is higher.
Right. That's right. And you would be right to say that. Housing I've just said it's housing commission, but this is you're renting, but you're not renting through a
real estate agent.
Tasmania, 3.5%.
Mm-hmm.
So 3.5% of Tasmania, and that also that is another one of those numbers I had to make. Well, what I'll say is that's a synthetic number that I had to make because it had not stated, which was under 2%.
That's weird.
Yeah,
you didn't have to answer the question.
It was not stated.
Right, okay.
And then howso, something like that, right? So 3.5%, so that's a little bit synthetic, that number. So, take that with a grain of salt. But let's say, for argument's sake, 3.5% of Tasmanians are renting in some sort of public housing, say. 11.3% of Aboriginals. 1 in 10.
Well, that's shit.
So they're getting... So if we're looking
are they getting access to more?
It has been observed that, and I will stop doing that, but 11.3%. So in going back to the questions we asked, how are they compared to the rest of Tasmania? Where you would argue they are much better served by public housing, much better served, 3 times better served
than the average Joe Blow on the street.
We can't quite. We can't.
Well, maybe TBA.
That would be a hypothesis that would need to be tested.
Or the Aboriginal specific organisations are better at it than
I
the
hope
housing.
They are.
Well, 11%.
So are they better at getting people in there? Are they more willing to do it? There's a whole bunch of things. But anyway, on the face of it, 3.5% Tasmania, 11.3%.
Are there Aboriginal only?
Yes, definitely.
Housing.
Yes,
options?
definitely. Yes.
Right. So that might also account for that.
Let me be careful today. I believe so.
Right.
Not definitely. I believe so.
I.e., you must be someone who was of Aboriginal background to take that housing.
And I would like to think that's more than being check a box.
Oh God, you'd hope so, wouldn't you?
You really hope so.
Because everyone would just check the box, surely.
Does that explain the difference in numbers?
I don't know. Yeah, maybe.
We don't know. So there you go. Housing.
That's a difference.
So there you go. So in summary,
so at both ends of the spectrum,
they have more access to housing, public housing, and they have more access to apparently buying a house. Okay.
I'm just trying to think whether or not any of my
but they're not as
experience whether or not there was anything on the forms about that, and I can't remember.
There sure as shit is in education, let me assure you.
Banking there is, just in general, but I mean in terms of a mortgage, I don't know.
What did you get a better rate in the thing, or is it just make sure we don't accidentally make sure our persecution of our usual customer is taken more carefully?
No, I don't
So
know.
there you go.
They
So that's
ask
housing.
everything. They ask everything else under the sun. They want to know what you had for breakfast and how many times you pee. You know, that kind of thing. So I'd be surprised if there wasn't.
Income. Moving on. Income. These are really shitty numbers. So I couldn't get good equivalent figures. So I can only discuss. I can give you. I'm going to say 3 things.
Yeah.
And then from that we can have a bit of a discussion around. But it's not great. So 1/3 of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander households in Tasmania, 32.7%, but a third, reported a total household weekly income of $1,000 or more in 2021, compared with 36.7% nationally. Okay, I said these aren't good numbers. So these income numbers aren't as good as what I'm being compared, because I want to compare against Tasmania. But it's saying in Tasmania the Aboriginal population seems to be a little bit under the national average. Mm-hmm. Okay,
per week.
So we'll add that, and so that's over $1,000. The median household weekly income for Aboriginal and Torres Strait household in Tasmania was $768. I'm going to get by on that. This was lower than the national average of $830. So we're talking about national figures here. So both the amount of people that make more, the amount of Tasmanian Aboriginals that make more than $1,000 a week is slightly lower than the national average, but still a third, which seems to correlate fairly well to those that are buying a house. And the median, for those listening, the middle number, not the average, the middle, is $768, which is a little bit lower than the national average. So, let me temper that with the next thing that you want to temper it with. Let's talk about Tasmania, all of Tasmania. Less than $650 total weekly income is 21% in Tasmania, where Australia, it's 16.5%. So what we can say from that is that overall Tasmania is a few percent below, nearly 5% there, below the Australian average. I could tell you that too. That's the whole point of this. And those other Aboriginal numbers seem to fit, which again is another bit of a theme of mine, which I said in the introduction, is it's just the whole of Tasmania is a little bit lower.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
And as we've already seen, there's ups and downs. But in age, there's no doubt there.
Yeah.
So they're the best figures I could kind of come up with. So they're a bit wishy-washy.
Income shit here.
Yeah.
I have laughed at job ads that I have seen.
Yeah. Well, give an example. That one.
There was one for Launceston City Council where I thought it was a full-time role, and honestly I thought it was a part-time role for the amount of money that they'd put on it. And I clicked on it thinking, God, who knows why, but I think I was just intrigued, clicked on it and went, that's a full-time job. I don't get out of bed for that. So
it was like half.
It was $40-something thousand a year
for
a full-time role.
Job. Yeah.
With full-time hours.
And did it need a degree? Or?
Oh, of course.
Yeah. So anyway, unfortunately I couldn't give you good numbers for income.
But income across the board here, anecdotally.
Well, no.
Well,
here, no.
From me, I mean,
this
anecdotally, people don't earn very much here.
Yeah, empirically, it's lower. Anecdotally, yes, we've definitely seen some things that are hilarious.
Yeah, even to the fact of
there's not many six-figure jobs in Tassie.
I've told multiple people they need to be charging more on their business rates, cleaning, etc.
Right, so I have some very good statistics on health.
Oh yeah.
So that's it. We're moving on to
health.
So
generally, in my opinion, Aboriginal health is shithouse.
And all Tasmanian health is shithouse.
Tasmanian is shithouse also. So let's see.
Right. So I have no figures on. Access to health or anything like that. This is all about your health, and individual conditions.
What
right?
are you coping
so
with?
There's check a box on the census, if the listener will remember, where it has, arthritis, asthma, cancer, dementia, right? So we can drill right down into all that.
May I? And I'm assuming people wouldn't check a box here just for fun. Like, it's not trendy to say that you've got cancer.
I don't know.
Cool. All right, let's go.
The numbers are there. So we're going to talk about Tasmania first, than Aboriginals. Arthritis, 12.2% of Tasmania said they have arthritis. Remember?
Older population.
10.1% of Aboriginals.
Okay, so they're not as prone.
Then
hopefully
they are not reporting arthritis as much. Asthma, 9.4% of Tasmanians have asthma. 16.1%, so a bit higher in asthma.
Yeah.
Okay. Cancer, including being in remission. Tasmania, 3.4%.
Well, that's low, I'm assuming. Anyway.
Not as low as the Aboriginals, 2.2.
Good.
All right. So we're better on arthritis. We're better on cancer.
Okay.
Happy days. Dementia, including Alzheimer's. Tasmania, 0.8%.
That's surprising to me because of the older population.
The amount of
dotards wandering around.
Aboriginals, 0.4%.
Oh, okay.
However,
they don't make it to that age.
They might not make it to that age.
Yeah,
They
wow.
might not, because that's definitely an older person's thing. Now, this is interesting. Diabetes.
Oh, that'd be, I'm guessing, higher.
5.1 and 5.1. No.
Right, okay. Again, it just shows that the Tasmanian Aboriginal population is not the same as Northern Territorians.
Nope.
Or Queenslanders.
Might be fairly similar to the first.
Might be the same as your next door neighbour. Right.
So there you go.
So they are
I do not make that claim.
Because I'm sure, which I will have to look up, I am sure that the mainland Aboriginal population has a big problem with diabetes.
Yeah, because they eat shit and they drink a lot, and that's where you get type 2 diabetes. I don't know whether or not they have more incidence of type 1 diabetes. That is beyond my
remit for today.
That'd be very interesting. Just like where I mentioned, I don't know what things they're prone to, like our African American friends, where they have there's things that they have just from where they are. So in the same token as like they don't get sunburn as much.
They're black.
That's right. But they do get sickle cell anemia.
But they do get sunburnt too. That's
of course. Yeah. But not as easily. There's a reason for that. They've got a shitload more melanin in their skin. Right, back to the thing.
Okay, same.
Heart disease.
Oh, yeah.
Tasmania, 4.5%. Aboriginals, 3.7%.
So they're doing better on that too.
We'll draw a conclusion at the end. Kidney disease. 1.1% of Tasmanians have kidney disease. 1.2% of Aboriginals have kidney disease. So a little higher. Don't forget, as I said at the beginning, when I'm talking about Tasmania, I mean all of Tasmania, so the Aboriginal figures are included.
Yep.
Okay. Lung conditions. 2.5% of Tasmania, 3.1% of Aboriginals. So that's interesting. So they had more asthma.
Is asthma and lung the same?
No. So lung condition, including pulmonary disease or emphysema. So, smoking higher.
I was just going to say smokers.
Don't know. So there you go. Right, this is interesting. Tasmania, mental health conditions, including depression or anxiety. 11.5% of our Tasmanian friends are sad or have a mental health illness. We're not to make fun of this, no matter how much I'd like to. 17.4%.
Wow.
So much higher. So a marked increase.
17 versus 11.
So that's noteworthy. Yep.
Again, younger population though.
Does that correlate with the younger population?
Yep.
You're quite right. Stroke. 1.2% of Tasmanians had a really bad headache. Aboriginal Tasmanians, 1%. So a little bit better on stroke. Any other long-term health conditions?
Right, that's just a bucket.
It's a bucket. 8.9% for Tasmanians. Aboriginals, 10%.
That's too hard to tell. That's could be anything, yeah.
No long-term health conditions.
Oh, yeah.
Tasmanians, 54.7%. Said, I'm good.
Yep.
No data is available for our Tasmanian Aboriginal friends.
They didn't ask them.
So the numbers don't correlate as well as I'd like. And they're not stated in all this. Mind your own fucking business. Well done, all Tasmanians. 7.8% for Tasmanians, and our Aboriginal friends, 7.2%. So very
just
similar.
Just
like, fuck off.
Yeah, mind your own business.
None of your business. None of your business. So there you go for health. So I think it is fair to conclude in health, with the exception of mental illness and breathing, with the age statistics, real breathing, complete respiration.
Much to muchness.
Better.
Oh, yeah, better.
Bit better. bit better. So one of the questions we can answer...
Again, younger.
Yep. So one of the questions I think is fair to answer that I asked the other day in that podcast, do they have some, chronic health issues?
No.
Not really.
No.
Not really. Not really. And that's where I was sort of saying it'd be good if you wanted to drill into... it'd be really interesting.
Show me where those pockets are.
Show me where these people are, and show me how they compare on their street to their other people.
Because you may well get like the cancer clusters and shit, and it's not based on race.
It's
based on location.
It's based on how
I
much
need
money
more
you've got.
wine.
Yep, we both need more wine. So let's stop. Stay there. We'll
But
stop for a
okay.
wine test.
Right.
Anyway, as long as you're interested, I
Yeah.
think this is... Today's podcast is brought to you by Di Bartoli Boxy Shiraz.
Pressings.
Di Bartoli Pressing Shiraz is
A very
bred
good boxagoon.
by...
Thank you. Stop.
Oh, right, okay.
I only want a small
All
one.
Is from Griffith through New South Wales, where traditionally you found two things in Griffith in New South Wales.
Oh, God, I know what you're going to say.
Orange farms and Italian gangsters.
Yes.
And Di Bartoli.
Cheers. Friend of the show.
Friends of the show. Supporters of the Doc Day Drinking podcast. Last Tuesday was an excellent vintage, gentlemen.
Oh, dear. All right, cool. So health.
So there you go. So we would... Age, not great. Housing, doing well.
Yeah.
Doing pretty well.
I'm impressed.
Very impressive. And if you add those all things together, you're doing better than Whitey.
Yeah.
No problem.
And I wonder if that's a cultural thing.
We don't know.
And by that, I'm not trying to be derogatory, but I mean, if you've grown up without something good, you want your own shit?
Who knows?
I don't know.
Who knows? But anyway, well done.
But why doesn't everyone want that? Tasmania in general.
We cannot draw those conclusions from these data.
And,
And
health-wise,
guys, we're doing pretty good.
Income, meh.
Income. I think the income conclusions we can draw.
Though, does it?
So we can no, it doesn't. And I did think that when they were talking about incomes on less than, which happens to coincidentally be the dole rate a fortnight.
How much is the pension rate? Yeah.
Yeah. So income's a bit fuzzy-wuzzy, but I think what we can say there with reasonable certainty is doesn't seem to be particularly worse than anywhere else.
No.
It seems to be about the same as Tasmania. Mm-hmm. And health, not bad. Not bad. And, yeah, because they seem to be skewed younger, is there more... I don't know. Is there more mental health issues amongst the young? There fucking seems to be.
Yeah.
And is that just the same?
Health changes depending on the age brackets.
Yeah. I could be mad,
Yeah,
barking
you're a
at the
farmer.
moon, foaming at the mouth, and I'm just going to be...
Not going
I'm
anywhere.
great.
Yep.
I'm
All
fine.
good. Just push it down.
Push it down.
Walk it off.
You just got molested. It's like, walk it off. Told you not to go near that uncle.
No.
Right, so...
All right. What's our next category?
Our next and one of our final categories is education.
Okay.
And I've kept it... So we've got a synthetic number, and it would be I leave it as an exercise to the reader to go and drill down into all of it. But this is what I give a shit about, right? With all this, I'm talking about basics. Have you got a house? Have you got a Year 12 education? Have you got access to healthcare? Are you not dropping dead? All those sorts of things. So let's just consider Year 12 completed.
Right.
You've finished your HSC, or whatever the fuck they call it down here in Hobbiton, right?
Yep.
Tasmania. The Tasmanian number is synthetic. They don't have completed Year 12. But what they do have is they're saying, what's your highest qualification?
Right.
Right? So what I've done to get this number is I've added degree, diploma, and Year 12.
Okay, because yes, you need one to get the other.
Basing it, you need to get one to the other. So I've omitted certificate 2, 3, and 4 because you do not need a Year 12.
What is? I don't even know what that is.
That's right, because we have proper pieces of paper. Yeah.
Oh.
Okay. But
Cool.
you don't need Year 12 to get into that, right?
Yep, cool.
Okay. You need Year 12 to sort of jump into it higher. So this number's a little bit flimsy, but it's not bad, right? It's not bad, I think. 41.8% of Tasmanians have completed Year 12. So we're not including all the people doing Year 12 and running up to Year 12 who are likely to. We're talking, because there was all those numbers.
Completed.
Right. So let's say, for argument's sake, rounding up, 42%. Mm-hmm. Aboriginal Tasmanians. So Aboriginals, 56.2% have a Year 12
Fucking
education.
go them.
So they're doing just fine.
Sensible.
So that 41% number is flimsy, but I would state right now...
The Aboriginal guys are bumping that up. Well done them.
And that I would also state that even if that number's flimsy, it ain't fucking 15 points flimsy.
No. Wow.
So there you go.
Good on them.
Stay in school.
Sensible. Smart.
Yeah. So there you go.
That's the only... Well, again, if you want to play the game...
So there you go. So
you need to be educated to go anywhere and change your circumstances. You need to be educated.
We're doing better in housing.
Yep. Because you're more educated.
We're doing better in education. We're doing no worse, slightly better, I think.
How many children do Aboriginal people have, though? Because the higher educated tend to have less children, but they've got more young'uns. So, interesting.
So there's lots of interesting inferences we can get from that.
Wow.
So there you go. Not what you expected.
No.
And the conclusions that I'm drawing then from that is like, you're all pretty much in the same boat.
You do not need to bang on about how much you are... What's the word I'm looking for? Not discriminated against. What's the word? Where you
vilified?
Yeah, where you're less. Like you get.
Well, let's just say. Well, let me be more reasonable. If there has been equity programs in the past to bring Tasmanian Aboriginals up on par with Tasmanians,
well done them.
I think it's succeeded.
Done.
And do we need to still continue doing it?
Not really.
I don't know. Does it need maintenance?
How far does it need to go?
But really, realistically, based on those numbers, I think it is fair to say that
a Tasmanian Aboriginal
is no better or worse off than a Tasmanian. With all the caveats we've discussed. So there you go.
Which may well come back to the fact of I identify as rather than...
Or may come back to the fact of that there are no full-blooded Tasmanian Aboriginals. None. Zero. None. There aren't any. Okay? So, I've got some other interesting figures for you. Two sets of figures you're going to find interesting, and we're going to have to keep our opinions largely to ourselves. So let's look at the census over the last 5-6 censuses as we chew on camera.
All right.
That's all right. So we're talking about so now these numbers we're talking about Tasmania versus Australia, and we're just talking about Aboriginal. So the percentage of Tasmanians that are Aboriginal.
Yep.
In 2021, 5.4%. We've already mentioned that figure.
Yep, 2021, 5.4%.
Overall in Australia, 3.2%. So Tasmania has a higher
percentage
Indigenous population than Australia. 2016, it was 4.6%. In Australia in 2016, it was 2.8%. In 2011, it was 4%. In Australia, it was 2.5%. So, just to recap, 2011, 2016, 2021 in Tasmania has gone 4, 4.6, 5.4. In Australia overall, it's been 2.5, 2.8, 3.2. So it's definitely growing.
It's more accelerating in Tasmania.
That is right. Well done, calculus. 2006 in Tasmania, 3.9%. 2001, 3.7%. 1996, 3%. What's interesting... In Australia, 2006, 2.5, 2001, 2.4, 1996. So it's pretty interesting. When I was going back, when I got those figures, 2006 and 2001, I'm going, did it level, and then it's come up a bit. 1996, 2.1. So it came up a bit. So it has been accelerating in Australia overall, but not as much as Tasmania. And you can still see, like, the difference between... percentage difference, let's talk about like 96 and 2001. In Australia, the difference was 0.3%. In Tasmania, it was 0.7%. From 2001 to 2006, in Australia, it was 2.4 to 2.5, so 0.1%. In Tasmania, it was 0.3%. So it's interesting, it's also gone down along with the national trend. In 2006, the difference was to the previous census was 0.2% in Tasmania. That's that same one, 0.1. Said the same numbers. 2006 and 2011 in Australia was the same, 2.5 and 2.5. So between those censuses, where in Tasmania it was also 3.9 and 4, so it didn't change much. So isn't it funny? So where there wasn't much change, there's always been more change in Tasmania. It's fair to say. It's always grown more, but it's grown as a factor of the overall Australian population of Aboriginals. So, but it's definitely taken off. Like between 2016 and 2021, Australia, the difference was 0.4%, where with Tasmania it was 0.8%, so twice as much. So there you go. So now I have some really interesting. So I don't know. Is there any interesting things to draw from there?
I don't think I can know from that.
No. So
apart from the fact that, as I said, the population is increasing
dramatically, and you'd have to look at what rules have changed.
That's what I mean. How do you classify someone of Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander?
All right. So here's where I have the Indigenous census counts.
What are they?
How many Indigenous people from in each state in this grand country of ours?
From the ABS?
All of these data are from the ABS.
Yeah, we are.
From 1966 through to 2001. And so if you look at 2001, where Tasmania, that was 15,773. So if so
the raw number.
Yeah, that's the raw number. Right, that's how many Tasmanian Aboriginals were. So 2001, 15,773, 1996, 13,873. Okay, so there's that sort of difference of 0.3% that we're talking about in those other numbers. Let's go back a bit further. Between 91 and 1996, 91, 8,882.
For where?
For Tasmania. And in 96 it was 13,873. So it doubled in one census.
Say that again.
I will. So I'll express it a different way. In the 1991 census,
for where?
Tasmania, there was 8,882 Tasmanian Aboriginals.
1991, 8,000-ish.
1996,
5 years
later, 13,873.
They did not have that many children.
So that's a lot of kids. Then if you look back at the difference between the 91 and the 86 census, so the 86 census was 6,716, and then the 91 census 5 years later was 8,882. So the question you ask, in that early 90s period from 91 to 96, was there...
When was Mabo?
Very good. This is the reason why you live here.
95, wasn't it?
It was in there. It was during Keating's tenure. And so were people more emboldened? Were they more accepted? They felt more comfortable to, yes, I am Aboriginal,
more
whereas
on the
before...
national scheme of things.
All those sorts of things. So there was a big jump. Yeah. So...
Okay.
So we're discussing the...
I don't know about those numbers, though. Like, how does...
This is where we're going to... You need a sip of wine for this one.
Okay, cool.
Okay. So that's what we're talking about, like from the 80s into the 90s, right? All very interesting.
Yeah, because what's the birth rate for...
Okay. The number of Tasmanian Aboriginals in the 1966 census.
1966.
So in 86?
1966. So that's 50 or 60 years ago.
Well, let's compare the last figure we talked about. The very last figure we talked about was 1986. There was 6,716 Tasmanian Aboriginals. Okay,
so 6,000-ish in 20 years.
So 20 years earlier, right?
So it's only one generation.
Not even. What do you reckon?
4,000 something?
36.
Fuck off.
36.
Has the method of... Did they not go to everyone for the census?
Now, when did they change when was that referenda? Was that 68 or was that earlier?
When our Aboriginal friends became not
Stop being.
fauna.
So let's just check that number. That date.
When they recognise them as humans finally.
I think, was it 68?
It was 60-something. So we're talking 66, 2 years before that.
Right. It was 1968, right?
Yep, so 2 years before.
So actually, the bill was in 67, and this referendum was passed with 90.7% of the vote. Like
we're all fucking humans.
We're all
Jesus
humans.
Christ.
Jesus
yes.
Christ. Yep. No, we might disagree around
Australia.
the edges on politics and all the rest of it.
Jesus.
So that is a very interesting number. So that gives you another interesting number. So in 1966, before that, apparently 36 Tasmanians identified as Aboriginal. After that referendum change in 1971, 671. So that's a much fairer number to work from. So, but still, wow! Like from 66 to 71, it went up. God knows how many times. 24 times or something. It's like from 36 to 671. So you can't argue that in between 66 and 71 there was definitely, let's give everybody the benefit of the doubt, especially back then.
They just weren't recognised.
They weren't recognised, and there probably wasn't a box to tick.
I'm surprised it was 36.
Yeah.
I'm surprised it didn't say 0.
Well, legally it would have been 0. 1976, 2,942. So from 671, 2,942. So this is interesting. So let's start so we're going to go 66, 71, 76, 81, 86, 91, 96, 36, 671, 2,942, 2,688. So it actually went down in 81. 6,716. They all went to Redfern.
They're smart.
6,716 in 86, 8,882 in 91, 13,873 in 96. So there you go.
There's got to be a change in methodology there.
All those things. But anyway, isn't it just amazing that...
Because those you can't...
You're looking at 30,000 in now, and in 1966 it was 36.
Because the birth rate in Australia in general is going down. Like you can't...
You would need to go and have a look at all that data and do all that, and I leave that as an exercise to the reader.
Wow.
But, yeah. Yes. Definitely wow. Definitely wow. But what I will say, for all of those numbers, there were pretty big jumps between 66 and 71. So let's look at Victoria. 1,700.
What was Australia-wide, the referendum?
I don't have those numbers. I'd have to sum them.
The referendum was
Yeah, it's federal.
So should have been 0 in 66 for everywhere.
Yeah.
Because Jesus.
So let's say in Victoria, right, in 66 there was 1,790, and then in 71 there was 6,371. So I mean it went up. New South Wales 14,219 in 66, 23,873 in 71. So there was a big jump. Did we? Here's definitely a fucking change of methodology, right? From 76 to 81 in New South Wales, we observed the same thing. 40,450 went down to 35,367.
So it's gone down.
Yeah, so there's definitely been a change there. Didn't in the Australian Capital Territory.
What year was that? Sorry.
That was the census between 76 and 81.
When were wars?
There's definitely been a change of methodology. We didn't go and kill them all.
No,
we did that years ago.
Going to war.
No.
No?
No. There were no significant wars in 76 to 81 that Australia were involved in. The fall of Saigon was in 1975, around there. And we weren't really...
We were late to that anyway.
No, we weren't.
Weren't we?
Nope.
I thought we were. I didn't do a lot of history.
No. So there you go. So anyway, so there's the interesting encounter. So
just anecdotally from me, that the Tasmanian Aboriginal population is increasing at an accelerating rate. I have a problem. I think that might be because of the way the question is worded on the census. You can identify as a cat. Like, I can identify as an Aboriginal, and then that data is fucked.
We would have to have a look. I'm not sure about that.
I think they're smarter and they've all left the island at one point because clearly they're better educated. There's not... Well, that'll be interesting too. Everyone here... I shouldn't say everyone. The majority of people here don't stay.
No.
There's not enough employment and opportunity here that you might finish your schooling and then you all bugger off to Melbourne or Sydney.
Censuses are always done at where you are at that particular time. They draw the line in the sand there for that, so there's less fidgy-widginess. No,
but I'm just saying that there might be...
And I'm just saying that too. Yeah. But I don't think, I don't know of anything significant in 1976 to 1981 that would actually cause the numbers to have gone down, besides a different method of counting them.
Yep.
Just like there was obviously a different method of counting them between 66 and 71 because beforehand you didn't exist, and you would also say, culturally, that obviously things have changed where it is less
acceptable and encouraged.
Acceptable. I won't say encouraged. It's certainly acceptable. I
don't mean just Aboriginality. I mean encouraged to know your background and to recognise your background.
That is true. Again, I'm playing with a very straight bat for our Aboriginal friends. Do I think there's grift in a lot of this stuff? Yep, I really do. Do these numbers bear that out? No, they don't. Do these numbers bear out that things aren't as bad as what the average narrative is? These numbers show that I think you just... I think you as a Tasmanian Aboriginal, based on the numbers that I've shown, you're not really any better or worse off.
Than the average Tasmanian.
With the caveat of the age demographics, I think you need to look more about that. Based on that, doesn't seem to be as older things, and that's a big deal.
Yeah.
That's a big deal. But you seem to have better housing, you seem to have better education, you have a younger population. What else did we say in there?
Your income's
on par. Education, better. Health, arguably better. Income, no worse. Housing, better. Age, that's a real issue. Seems to be an issue. So, and that's a big issue. If you're a Tasmanian Aboriginal, and your life expectancy is, pretty big percentages lower than the average, that's an issue. That's a big issue. It doesn't matter if you've got a lovely house if you're not alive to live in it.
Yeah.
So there you go.
But why? Why is that?
Don't know. We leave that as an exercise to the reader. But that is why I would like to know, when you drill down, let's look at where you're living, what the suburbs are like, and then compare. If you're a middle-class Aboriginal and a middle-class Tasmanian, are you closer together demographically than a lower-class Aboriginal and a lower-class regular Tasmanian? And similarly for upper class, is there no difference whatsoever? Or do you better or do you worse? But those I can't. Well,
it was difficult to find the information too, wasn't it?
Yeah, This is a podcast, not a job.
Yeah.
So what I would say is, anyone with the courage,
please.
There's an honours thesis in that. Just that work. That would be the work that I've done so far. Would be enough for a honours thesis proposal to say I'd be interested in seeing what's going on, and then work from there.
What were our 3 questions that we wanted answered?
We had 4. We had one about what sort of culture is there, and we can't answer that.
No.
Compared to the rest of Tasmania, we've answered that.
Yeah.
Is there generational disadvantage? I can't answer that from these numbers.
No.
So I'd need to look at...
Based purely on an age stat, the fact that they don't live as long...
You could argue, is there more generational advantage because people who die younger don't spend all of their money as much and therefore they leave more of it to you? But what I would argue with the generational disadvantage is that income-wise they don't seem to be any worse off, and housing-wise they seem to be maybe better off.
So yes, the generational wealth passed on may be more because they have housing.
We can't answer it.
Maybe.
But at the moment, it doesn't seem any better. These are, again, honours kids,
And what was the other one?
And then health issues, and we've answered that.
Yeah.
Surprisingly. So I think there was a few surprises there for you.
Yes.
Out of that. So there you go. So there, I have done my homework. I have fulfilled my contractual obligation to our many listeners. Shout out to...
3. Beer Drinking Aussie. Thank you very much
for whatever you did to send umpteen subscribers our way. We still have a very, very small... under 50 subscriber base, but hey, it ain't under 20, so we're moving up. Like our Tasmanian Aboriginal friends, we are multiplying subscribers very quickly. Maybe they like to fuck, and who doesn't? So bless
Jesus
them.
Christ.
Come on, I've been reasonably straight bat the whole way through. I've got to make some crass jokes. So So anyway, so it's very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. But I did want to answer those questions because for once I did want to follow up and sort of draw some genuine conclusions.
So yes, artist man.
Yeah, coming back to our friend.
Would be very hard up to find someone in this present day and age who he'd want to atone for their sins, because there doesn't seem to be much difference between Aboriginal Tasmanians and average Tasmanians. So that's,
So there you go. Based on that, Mr. Maynard, it would behoove you to look at some of these statistics and drill down if you'd like to do some work. If you'd like to have a look, because I think at the moment we all seem to be in this together. Maybe
in general people need assistance. In general people need more education.
Overall, Tasmania is behind the rest of Australia. Yeah. And the Tasmanian Aboriginals, with the exception of that age that we looked at, which is a big exception, underlined, don't seem to be all that much worse off, and they seem to be better off in a lot of ways. So
well done them.
So well done them. Let's hope
wonder why. Wonder how. What are they doing? They're doing it well, whatever it is.
So are the programs effective? Doing better in education.
Maybe some of the other programs should have a look at the Aboriginal programs and make some changes.
Maybe we should just...
Or maybe we just have a program that everyone goes to.
Maybe we find out the programs that work.
And just use them.
Yeah. And then you could test them. You could A, B, let's experiment with kids. Hey...
They're sponges. They bounce back.
1930s policies right here. Do we A and B a little bit of this and see what's going on? Like swap our...
And why hasn't anyone actually
It's difficult
done
I'm just imagining. Could you imagine ethics? So what I want to do is I want to get two groups of Tasmanian children, some Aboriginal Tasmanian children and some not Aboriginal Tasmanian children, and I want to split them again into two groups and swap half of them over one way and swap half of them over the other way and see what the outcomes are. Could you imagine ethics? My God.
Why?
I don't know. Because you're seriously experimenting on children with percentages of educational outcomes. So it'd be very, very interesting to see.
I thought you were just talking about who wants a lolly. Doesn't make any difference.
Did you see that?
Did you see that headline? I think it was Queensland, where there was a school and they thought that someone had poisoned all the children. It turns out they just had too many lollies.
Jesus Christ. Well, that'd be the diabetes. We're surprisingly, our Tasmanian Aboriginal friends aren't doing as badly on diabetes.
So that again, that on one hand reinforces my mental picture of a
stereotypical view.
Yes, of a Tasmanian Aboriginal.
They're Tasmanian.
They're Tasmanian, full stop.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. Based on these statistics that we have disseminated this evening. And
there's always going to be outliers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. These are statistics.
Cool.
Lies, damned lies and statistics. There you go. So, again, we're rambling on a bit, but we've had a bit of wine. But we hope that was interesting and informative.
I'd like to see some more information. Too.
Well, it can be up to you to do it because I've done my bit.
Why? Yeah. I won't say that.
I did warn her beforehand to try and keep it as...
It may not fit the narrative that certain people are trying to push if there's more information and...
As we wrap this up, the artist currently known as Mr. Maynard, I always like to think of it like the artist formerly known as, but...
Prince is dead.
So the artist Maynard isn't talking about current day in his defence.
He's talking about
the past. But
sins.
all I can say is right now, which is what I'm bloody well interested in, right now things seem to be no better or worse than anything else. And we can go and, if you want to do this...
I think that's going to be pretty good compared to the rest of Australia too.
If in another 25 podcasts, if we go and we could do a broad... Like, let's leave Aboriginals out of it and just do Tasmania versus the rest of Australia, and we'll probably find that, we're not going rah, rah, rah Tasmania, because I'd say most of these numbers are shit compared to the rest of Australia, which we might find is not the case.
Maybe.
But I do not want to turn this into a bloody statistics podcast.
No.
But as I said, I thought it was worth doing. As I said, we were certainly possibly chucking around a few sacred cows. And I thought, let's just basic demographics from 3 sources, all from the ABS.
Yeah.
And based on that... Professional statisticians might rip me a new arsehole, I don't know, but based on that...
They seem to be doing okay.
It looks no different from everything else.
No different.
Which is not... I'm not drawing any conclusions
I was going to say,
on that.
Tasmania's a bit... Yeah. Anyway, cool.
Cool. That's it.
Cheers, good evening.
Cheers, good evening. Off you go, my children. Beware of statisticians. And...
beware of checking boxes.
Beware of checking boxes. And beware of stereotypes, because we proved a few wrong there, few surprising moments. So there you go. Anyway, good evening. We'll see you next time.